Stephen Neale, an award-winning journalist and author, will be talking to us about people's rights to wild camp in the UK and Republic of Ireland's most secluded places. In his book, Wild Camping, Stephen reveals how the right to sleep outdoors has been whittled away hundreds of years ago. But we have more rights than most people realise to camp outside in the wild. Hello, Stephen. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
Firstly, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I noticed on forums, on the internet in particular, that people were frequently asking, where can I go wild camping? Where can I go and sleep in the woods? And it was common they were commonly told, you mustn't ask questions like this. It's illegal. We'll have to close we'll have to close down the thread if you continue to ask these sort of questions. That was worst case scenario. Sometimes it would be, we'll have to private message you, and it all just seemed. I thought it was rather sad that people thought that it's illegal and that you're committing a criminal offence just by doing something actually that's a wonderful thing to do, and it isn't. It mostly is not a criminal offence.
So why do you think it's important that we should be able to camp outside, wild camp?
Well, probably the most important thing about sleeping out is it's about as close to nature as you can get. I don't think there's any of us that don't go walking in the countryside or cycling or even, boating, but certainly all of us go walking in the countryside. But there is something wholly different in going for a walk in the countryside and you just keep on walking as the sun falls, and then when night time comes, you actually sleep in the outdoors, not in your garden, not on a campsite enclosed by fences and hedges and things, but you actually sleep in the outdoors in an unenclosed space, and there's something almost indescribable about that. But it's the best way to describe it really is that you are totally at one with nature. Waking up in the morning is a beautiful feeling.
And so, where can we camp in the wild?
Well, in the UK and Ireland, we can camp pretty much. Well, I wouldn't say anywhere. You can't camp anywhere. We have legal rights to camp in Scotland. It's a right enshrined in law. We have a right enshrined in law to camp on Dartmoor, most of Dartmoor. There are other places in the UK where we have rights to camp, but just because we don't have the right to camp doesn't mean we can't camp. So there are just unlimited amount of places that we can camp legally, and that would include woodland, rivers, tidal estuaries, tidal coast, mountains. It's just the list is endless.
And when would we be breaking the law if we camped in the wild?
Well, when we would be crossing the line, and we may be breaking the law, or we certainly would be breaking the law, is if a landowner approaches us. So say for instance we were on the Pennine Way, for instance. We may be up relatively high in the hills. If a landowner came along and said to us, look, excuse me, but I would prefer you not sleep there. You're in your bivvy bag. Can you please move on? The moment we start to engage in a dispute and start to argue, that's when we may be causing a breach of the peace. If we caused any criminal damage, if we were lighting a fire, that could constitute criminal damage. So there are all sorts of occasions when we could be breaking the law, but the simple act of sleeping is rarely, very rarely, will be breaking the law or constitute a criminal offence. But the rule is, if you're asked to move on, I've only ever been asked to move on once, and I'm 51. But if you are asked to move on, then just move on, or perhaps offer the landowner, just offer him some token payment, he or she, and that's often, or if that's often accepted. But so those are the occasions when we may be breaking the law.
If you were woken up in your tent in the middle of the night, could you do anything about it if they decided to ask you to move on?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. I mean, you see, part of the reason why people ask us to move on is they're confused as to why we're there. So, I mean, an example I could give you is if you set up a tent in the high street, which wouldn't be an example of wild camping, but if you set up a tent in the high street, then a police officer may come up and say, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" And if you just said, "Well, I'm just sleeping," you know, what's the problem? The police officer will probably say, "Well, sorry, but can you move on?" As opposed to if you were sleeping outside a shop, police officer says, "Why are you doing that? Why are you sleeping?" And you said, "Well, actually, I'm waiting for the shop to open in the morning because they've got a sale on." The police officer will likely say, "Oh, okay, that's fine. If you have any problems, I'm down the road." So a lot of the misconception about wild camping is to do with people don't always understand. So if you do get woken up in the night by a landowner, what are you doing? "Oh, I'm on my way to the next town. I'm on a 2-3 day hike." If you explain that to the landowner, you're not causing any trouble, you're not a criminal, you have no intention of lighting a fire, and actually, look, I've got a bag here, I've been picking litter up on the way, they are almost always very, very happy for you to be there, as long as they understand why you're there. I mean, I used to get woken up a lot just sleeping in cars and things. You know, it's just landowners just want to know why you're there, what you're doing. As long as once they realise you're not a criminal, then no problem. But if they do ask you to move, you must move. You must move on.
But at the same time, our rights to camp have been whittled away, as you say in your book, Wild Camping. Why do you think that is, and how has it happened?
Our rights were mostly removed, around about 1,000 years ago, Norman invasion, post-1066. Before that, you know, it was commonplace. The majority of us lived, we didn't live wild, but we lived off the land. We collected firewood from the forest, we hunted, we had certain rights over the land, and post-1066, a lot of those rights were removed. It's one of the reasons the Magna Carta was the introduction of the Magna Carta. But the right to fish, the right to collect wood, the right to camp, so many of those rights were removed, and it was a way of the Normans, the new elites, of asserting themselves over the land, and that was part of it. And so some of there are some anomalies that still exist. Like, for instance, we haven't got a right in this country to fish on non-tidal waters. You know, that's an anomaly. We think it's normal, but it isn't normal. People living in other countries don't consider that normal. In many other countries, it isn't normal to not be able to camp in the wild, as it is in Scotland. It's a right in Scotland. It isn't a right in most of England.
Is there anywhere else, any other countries where it's guaranteed by law?
Yes, it's enshrined in law in Scandinavia. There are many countries where it's a right. There are many countries it isn't a right, but it's accepted. You know, it's generally accepted. I would say it's less accepted here than many other countries. When I was in my early 20s, I backpacked. I spent 5 or 6 or 7 years backpacking. Never ever had a problem. Never experienced any problem with anybody asking me to move on. It was just accepted. You know, sleeping in the woods or backpacking in the woods on the beaches. It wasn't a problem, but it can be more of a problem in the UK. I don't, you know, it's so even though it's not a right in all the countries of the world, it isn't frowned upon as much as it can be in the UK.
Why do you think that is?
Well, again, I think it's a legacy of the law changes. You know, forest law. The forest laws that were introduced by the Normans, it's where the stories of the Robin Hood type characters living in the forest, living off the land. You know, the forest laws were brutal. anyone caught hunting or fishing, you'd have your limbs removed, your hands cut off, your head cut off. Potentially, people were executed for breaking the forest laws. Most of Essex was under forest law. Almost all of Essex was under forest law. And it's a legacy of those old forest laws. In many other countries around the world, fishing is a good example. As I say, we consider it completely normal for somebody to go fishing in the sea and to catch a mackerel or a cod and to take that home. We consider it, almost offensive for people to go fishing in a non-tidal river or a lake and then to take the fish home. It's not considered and that's all a legacy of the old forest laws.
In your book, Wild Camping, you refer a lot to the law. I take it this must have taken, was it years of research, or did you also have guidance?
Well, I did have, part of my, part of putting the book together was looking at the laws, to a close examination of the law, the difference in civil law, criminal law. Trespass is a civil law rather than criminal. But, I was able to contact a law firm. I know a local law firm, Kersey's, and I spoke to one of the partners there, Anthony Wooding, and he was able to give me some fantastic advice, tell me when I was maybe pushing it too far, and is massively helpful in helping me understand the differences in criminal and civil law and explaining how to stay within the law.
And where can people find out more?
The book came out a couple of weeks ago in May. All they need to do is put wild camping into Amazon. Wild camping, sleeping in the wild in the UK and Ireland, and published by Bloomsbury.
Thank you, Steve and Neale.
You're listening to dialectradio.co.uk.